March 6, 1945. Cologne, Germany. An American Pershing rolled out from behind a shattered building and stopped in the shadow of the cathedral. Across the street, a German Panther was waiting. For years, the United States Army had been told it did not need a tank like this. Too heavy, too late, too disruptive. Too much trouble for a war America was already supposed to win. Then Corporal Clarence Smoyer settled behind the gun sight. The crosshairs found the Panther, and one 90-millimeter round cut through more than German armor. It cut through 4 years of delay. The tank did not arrive because the system worked. It arrived because a few men inside that system refused to stop forcing the question. And the question was simple. What happens when the richest industrial nation on Earth can build almost anything except the decision to change? In 1942, America had found its answer to modern war, the M4 Sherman. It was not glamorous, it was not invincible, but it could be built by the thousands. Detroit could stamp them out. Railroads could move them. Ships could carry them. Mechanics could repair them in mud, snow, and darkness. To commanders trying to fight a global war, that mattered. A perfect tank that arrived late was useless. A reliable tank that arrived everywhere looked like victory, and for a while it was. Shermans crossed North Africa. Shermans landed in Italy. Shermans rolled through France in numbers Germany could not match. But every strength carries a shadow. The Sherman had been designed around an assumption. American tanks would support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and keep moving. They were not supposed to stand nose to nose with the heaviest German armor and trade shots in the open. That job, the doctrine said, belonged to tank destroyers. So when engineers inside the Ordnance Department asked for a more powerful successor, a lower tank with a bigger turret ring, better protection, and a gun that could reach farther than the Sherman's 75-millimeter, the answer was not excitement. It was caution. Do not interrupt production. Do not complicate training. Do not break the supply chain. Do not solve a problem the doctrine says should not exist. That is how delay begins. Not with stupidity, with reasonable men protecting a system that already works. The early successor designs carried names that sounded like filing cabinet labels. T-20, T-22, T-23. They were not finished weapons yet. They were arguments built out of steel. The T-20 family moved the drive layout lower. The T-23 experimented with electric drive. The later T-25 and T-26 brought in the 90-millimeter gun. Each step said the same thing in a different language. The next battlefield would demand more than the Sherman could give. But Army ground forces saw another danger. Not German steel, American disruption. A new tank meant new parts, new training, new recovery vehicles, new ammunition flow, new bridge calculations, new manuals, new arguments in the middle of a war. And the Sherman line was already roaring. So the new tanks were tested, reviewed, debated, revised, delayed. Meanwhile, the war kept moving faster than the paperwork. In Tunisia, American crews learned that German guns could punish mistakes at terrifying range. In Italy, narrow roads and mountains turned maneuver into a luxury. Then came France and the Panthers. The Panther did not need to be everywhere to change everything. Its long 75-millimeter gun could kill Shermans at distances where Sherman crews often had to keep closing just to make their own shot count. That meant seconds stretched into lifetimes. A Sherman crew spotting a Panther did not simply ask, "Can we hit it?" They asked, "Can we live long enough to get close?" The crews improvised because soldiers always improvise when the official solution is late. They welded spare track links to hulls. They stacked sandbags. They hung logs. They learned to flank, smoke, rush, hide, and pray that artillery answered before the next German round did. Some of those tricks helped. None of them turned a Sherman into a Pershing. By late 1944, the argument had become harder to hide. The Battle of the Bulge threw American armor into brutal winter fighting against German Panthers, Tigers, and anti-tank guns. Shermans still fought with courage. They still won battles. They still carried the war forward. But courage was not armor, and numbers were not immunity. Inside Ordnance, Major General Glazon Barnes had been pushing the heavier tank problem for years. Barnes was not a battlefield celebrity. He was not the kind of figure who gets statues. He was an ordnance officer with an engineer's impatience for bad assumptions. He understood that the question was not whether the Sherman had been useful. Of course it had. The question was whether usefulness in 1942 should be allowed to dictate survival in 1945. That is the trap institutions fall into. They judge the new idea by the cost of changing. They do not count the cost of staying wrong. In December 1944, the decision finally broke open. 20 T-26E3 tanks were ordered to Europe. Not hundreds. Not enough to transform the entire front. 20. A number small enough to call a trial, and large enough to expose years of hesitation. They arrived at Antwerp in January 1945. The mission that followed had an almost harmless name, Zebra. But there was nothing harmless about what it meant. Barnes himself went to Europe with the special team. Their job was to get the new tanks into American hands fast, fix the early problems, and find out whether the machine that had lived too long in reports could survive where reports stopped mattering. The crews were not handed a miracle. The Pershing was heavier than the Sherman. Its mobility was not perfect. Its mechanical systems still had teething problems. It needed 90mm ammunition. It challenged bridges and recovery crews. It asked men who had learned survival in one machine to trust another with almost no time. Some officers were skeptical because skepticism was rational. A new tank in the last months of a war could become a burden faster than it became a weapon. But one fact cut through the doubts. The Pershing's gun could do what the Sherman's standard 75mm often could not. It could stand at combat range and make German heavy armor respect the shot. On February 25, 1945, the Pershing entered combat near the Roer River. The next day, one of them, a tank named Fireball, was hit by a concealed Tiger at close range. The first round punched through the mantlet area. Men died inside. That mattered. Because the Pershing was not magic. It could be killed. It could fail. It could break. It could be caught in the wrong place, at the wrong angle, by a crew that never saw the shot coming. But Fireball was repaired and returned to service. And soon after, Another Pershing at Elsdorf knocked out a Tiger Eye at roughly 900 yards. The message moved quietly through the armored force. Not a speech, not a headline, a change in posture. American tank crews had something they had not had in enough numbers before. A tank that could make the enemy hesitate. Then came Cologne. By March 1945, the city was already broken. Walls opened to the sky. Glass ground into the streets. The cathedral standing above the ruins like a black spine. The 3rd Armored Division pushed into the city with infantry and armor, working through rubble-choked roads. Near the cathedral, a German Panther lay in ambush. 2 Shermans came forward. They did not see it in time. The Panther fired. 1 Sherman was hit and burned in the street. 3 men were killed. This is the part old combat films cannot fully show. They can show the smoke. They can show the tank burning. They can show men running low through rubble. They cannot show the calculation that happens in every surviving crewman's mind. Where is the gun? Can it see us? Can we move? Can we shoot? Do we have seconds or less? Eagle 7, a Pershing from the 3rd Armored Division, was nearby. Its commander, Bob Early, brought the tank around. Its gunner, Clarence Smoyer, took the sight. The Panther had been dangerous because it controlled the street. But now the street had changed. The German crew was no longer facing another Sherman. They were facing the argument America had delayed. Smoyer fired. The first round hit the Panther. Then another. The German tank was destroyed in front of the cathedral, and the moment was captured by an Army Signal Corps cameraman. That footage is why the duel became famous. But the film is not famous because it shows a tank exploding. War had already produced more fire than anyone could bear. The film matters because of what it represents. For years, American crews had been told, in effect, to solve heavy armor with tactics, numbers, and courage. At Cologne, a different answer finally arrived. Steel answered steel. Gun answered gun. And the men inside Eagle 7 did not have to make a heroic bargain with a machine that was outmatched before the fight began. That was the victory inside the victory, not that the Pershing won the war. It did not. Too few arrived too late for that. Only a small number saw combat before Germany surrendered. The Sherman remained the tank that carried most American armored fighting in Europe. But sometimes a weapon's importance is not measured only by how much territory it takes. Sometimes it is measured by what it reveals. The Pershing revealed that the late war battlefield had changed faster than the institution built to serve it. It revealed that the cost of delay does not appear in meeting notes. It appears in burned-out vehicles, in improvised armor, in crews told to close distance under guns that already have them ranged. And it revealed something even more uncomfortable. Many of the men who resisted the heavier tank were not fools. They had real reasons. Production mattered. Logistics mattered. Training mattered. Reliability mattered. They were right about the value of the Sherman. They were wrong about letting that value become a wall. A system can be competent and still be late. That is the hardest kind of failure to recognize, because it does not look like collapse from the inside. It looks like discipline, efficiency, consistency, 1,000 good reasons to wait, until the battlefield sends back the invoice. 5 years later, the old argument returned in a new uniform. June 1950. North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel with Soviet-built T-34-85 tanks. The first American units rushed into Korea were not ready for that kind of armored shock. Light tanks and older anti-tank weapons struggled. Once again, crews faced sloped armor and a gun that could punish them before they had a proper answer. And once again, the Pershing was pulled toward the front. By then, it was no longer a new wartime gamble. It was an aging, underpowered machine with problems of its own, especially in Korea's hills. But its 90-millimeter gun still mattered. Against the T-34-85, the Pershing gave American crews something priceless. A fair fight, not comfort, not certainty, a chance. In armor combat, confidence is not decoration. A crew that believes its gun can kill and its armor may hold makes different decisions. They aim steadier. They move with less panic. They hold a position a few seconds longer. And sometimes a few seconds is the difference between a line collapsing and a road staying open. The Pershing would eventually give way to the M46 Patton, then to later American tank designs. Its direct service life was not long, but the design argument lived on. Better firepower, lower profile, heavier protection. A willingness to build for the battlefield that is coming, not the one the manuals still describe. That argument shaped the Patton family and reached far beyond the streets where the Pershing first proved itself. So the story is not that America built the perfect tank. It did not. The Pershing was late, heavy, mechanically imperfect, limited in numbers, and never present in enough strength to rewrite the European war by itself. The real story is sharper than that. America had the industrial power to build a better answer. It had officers who saw the need. It had prototypes pointing in the right direction. It had evidence arriving from every front. But it still delayed. Because the old answer was working well enough to defend itself. That is how good systems become dangerous. They do not fail all at once. They succeed long enough to make change look reckless. And then one day, a crew turns a corner in a ruined city, and the cost of waiting is sitting in the street with its gun already loaded. At Cologne, Eagle 7 fired, and the Panther burned. But the deeper target had been there for years. It was not German armor. It was the belief that tomorrow's war could be survived with yesterday's certainty. The Pershing did not prove that every new idea should be rushed. It proved that refusing to change is also a decision, and sometimes it is the most expensive decision an army can make.